One of the wonderful things of being in my position is I get away with murder. But 5 years before American military forces came to Europe, there were a handful of Americans, almost 3,000, who already were in Europe and were fighting fascism, and I was one of them. There was quite a contingent from the Northwest. I didn't come from the Northwest then. I came from Brooklyn. I'm a recent inhabitant. But of the 60 or 70 guys who came from the Northwest, I'm the last remaining veteran of the Lincoln Brigade. Feels funny to be the last page in a little book, but then I also have a couple of pages and a couple of bigger ones. You guys who are vets, I have to share something with you. To me, being in World War II was a holiday. I have to tell you that, compared to what I went through in Spain. In World War II, I hardly ever missed a meal. I always had a pair of shoes. These are things I didn't have in Spain, by the way. I didn't lose weight. I lost 45 pounds in Spain. So I was called in to psychiatrists at that time. They thought I was crazy. I was enthusiastic about getting to Europe to fight Hitler. And they questioned me as to why I'm so aggressive and bitter and angry. And of course, before I was finished with the psychiatrist, he was ashamed of the fact that he wasn't putting on a uniform and going out to fight. So I just wanted to kind of open the discussion with a little bit of flavor. I have been a militant radical for 75 years. Now, how do you explain somebody staying on such a course for such a long period of time? And the reason is very simple. I enjoyed most of it. I never participated in a social struggle from which I didn't come out somewhat richer. Like, for example, I know more about black life than almost any white person I ever meet. Because most white people, even if they're wonderful people, talk about black people, sometimes talk to black people, sometimes talk with black people, but none of them are inside the life of black people, and I had the good fortune to have such a period of time and learn a great deal about black people who know more about us, white people, than we know about them, by the way. That's another subject I could talk about for hours, okay? I often tell my audiences, particularly young people, they get shocked when I say it, that I'm much richer than Bill Gates. No, and I'm dead serious. I got something he'll never have. I have the love and respect of a lot of people. You're right, not just nationally, even internationally. And the reason they love and respect me is not for my beauty. It faded a couple of years ago, although some guys say I still look like a handsome 80-year-old. Certainly not for my wealth. I have no jobs to offer, so what have I got to offer? People that make them respect me, that Bill Gates has to wonder about, because he has to wonder about it. He's smart, looks in the mirror, sees a nerd, and says, what do they want? I don't have that problem. I know what they want, what they need, and have plenty of it to give. You don't run out of it. It's the kind of capital you don't run out of. Love and respect is the one thing in the world that the more you give, the more you have. There is no other commodity like it. Any other commodity, when you give, you have less, whether it's money or material or property. But this is a commodity which you can't run out of. And to this day, my life would be a misery because I suffer a great deal of pain and I'm on serious painkillers most of the time. You may have not noticed yet. I'm on sort of very often. And what makes my life bearable is my relationship with other people. There's not a week goes by that I don't have 5, 10, 15, 20 visitors, including some of them who are, whew. Does the name Eduardo Galeano mean anything to you? No? Okay, Edward Galeano is the outstanding poet philosopher of Latin America, internationally renowned every place except in the United States, and here too on some campuses, but that's it. So Galeano comes to visit me a couple of months ago, and we discovered that we're soul brothers, because the thing that keeps him going is the same thing. We feed out of the same trough, which is we're nourished by the love and respect we get from the people with whom we relate. Okay, enough of that. Having told you how wonderful I am, I'll now get on to well, I do think so. By the way, I've been accused occasionally of being, what is the word when you're too wrapped up in yourself? Egotistical, that's the word. And that's bullshit. These people don't know the difference between egotism and extreme self-confidence. I am extremely self-confident. To the point, and I'll tell you this, it happened only one time, that when I addressed an audience, and most of them either registered a negative response and even booed me. My response to that is, not what did I do wrong, but what the fuck is wrong with these kids? Don't they recognize quality? No, I'm not kidding you. When they meet it. Now I know that's a hard thing for a lot of people to swallow, but isn't it wonderful to achieve a state of being where you feel absolutely certain that you are special? Yes. People have described some of us as ordinary people who do extraordinary things. No, we're also extraordinary people who do ordinary things, because the ordinary things are the difficult things to do. Now, having said that, I want to get down to why, for me, it turns out to be, a pleasure in a way, although I came with some apprehension to address veterans of a number of wars, because you have a very special place in society, and you have special clout, and the question comes down to how you use that clout. And your clout will be especially strong with very young people. And I would say whatever else we do in the future to address our concerns primarily to youth, because they're the ones who are going to make history. And the reason I say that is we have a progressive movement in this country that in the main spins its own wheels today. It does. It spins its own wheels, and the reason is not that they're bad people, good people. Compassionate people, empathetic people. They care about Darfur. They'll give money for it. They care about suffering all over the world, and they'll make sacrifices, some big, some small, to help out. But that is a lot different than politics of the gut. You can feel compassion and you can feel empathy, but that does not make history. It alleviates pain, perhaps, but it doesn't make history. Which brings me to the next chapter of this little book, which is, I never get pessimistic. I don't even know what that is. I also never get optimistic. I don't know what that is. Both of those are, to me, temporary insanity. I never get hopeful, but you'll never find me hopeless. So when this new miracle took place recently, where they won back the country, it's nice. It's nice. Maybe it's a little slap in the ass of George Bush, but it's not a kick in the ass with the boot left in. It's not that. It's not that. And anybody that gets the illusion that the war will wind down more quickly is living in a dream world in my book. This war will go on. And in some ways, I have to say this, it'll be harder to fight the progressive Democrats than it is to fight the Republicans. They're much easier to demonize. Now we have a president who, on top of everything else, is inept. We're probably going to get a president who is more apt, and I don't know whether that'll be all for the good. So don't get your hopes up too high. Keep the fire burning under their asses is the only tool we really have at this point. Now, I want to tell you why I'm not pessimistic about the future. There are a few things going on in this world which are going to happen regardless of what the Democrats do or what we do. They're going to happen. One is the United States will soon not be the superpower of the world. That distinction, for good or bad, will go to China. There's no doubt in my mind. And China will be able to say to the United States, back off. Instead of public meetings about it, when they sit down for real power negotiation, I'm the Chinese delegate to the meeting, and I say, listen, you motherfuckers, if a little country like North Korea could let loose with 4 atomic farts and hold you at bay, we want you to know this is not a situation with us. We are the only power in the world that can take anything you throw at us and come up fighting. And it's true. Not to mention that in a 10 or 15-year period, China will also be a dominant factor in world economics. No question. No matter what happens, no matter what we do or don't do, that is happening. Now, I have my problems with the Chinese regime, and the Chinese in particular have a problem with that regime. But that regime also will be subject to forces that are practically unknown for China until today. The second thing that's going to happen is that for the first time in many, many years, a generation is coming up which faces a more difficult future than the generations we came out of. For a number of generations, we've been able to tell our kids, a better life awaits you. You will be able to go out and buy a house, and you will do this and that. And to some degree, it was true for a fairly large section of the population. That's over. The young people of the next generation will not be able to buy homes. They'll be lucky if they're able to move back and live with their parents while they're going to school. And no matter who's in power, the money necessary for a health program, educational work, will not be available because these motherfuckers have stolen it. And they've mortgaged the country, and the mortgage has to be paid. Now, I don't view that as a dismal picture, because what that means is that a generation will be up and coming that will be angry. Angry. Now, what does that mean in realistic terms? It could go either way. Anger, if given proper leadership and guidance, can result in fundamental historic change. It did during the Depression. I lived through it. And we achieved quite a bit. Many of the things that are taken for granted in our society, Medicare, we were the first country in the world to introduce that kind of program. Other countries outstripped us, but we were the first. And I could go down, trade unionism, the first country in the world that had an 8-hour workday was the United States. And that didn't come about through yeah. That came about through bam, bam, bam struggles in which people suffered a great deal. Some gave their lives, but we did achieve the 8-hour working day. And I could go on, but I'll stop for a moment on that track. So we face a future in which a whole generation of angry young people, frustrated young people. Now that's opportunity, it's also a great danger. Opportunity with good leadership, that could make for fundamental, structural, historical change for our country. Without that leadership, such people are apt to be corralled into nationalistic, revenge, anger, politics by populists who will create not what the Germans did or what the Italians did, but an American form of that kind of life. We use the word fascism a little too loosely. I don't think we're living under fascism right now. But without leadership, that situation can lead to some neo-fascism. It can. And why do I stress that? I stress that because the youth hold the key to the future. And you guys have a special obligation to talk to young people, to measure what you do or don't do by the degree to which you influence young people. They don't have to be great in numbers. It's the quality of what you do with young people. Because out of these young people potentially can come the activists and the leadership required for the crisis that's coming down the road, unavoidable crisis that's coming down the road. The problem with the current situation is, let's be honest with each other, with very few exceptions, most of us have eaten a good breakfast, gotten into a nice car, driven to a pleasant gathering of people, right? Had a nice discussion, set a date for another meeting. I don't want to totally negate the value of that, but we have to break out of that cycle. We have to break out of that cycle. And I think the time has come for veterans to realize that they have an obligation not only to talk to young people, but to mentor some of them, to make the road easier for them to develop the potential. Because among those young people are the future. Martin Luther Kings, name them, the guys who organized the unions, the people who did all the big important things on behalf of the people are in those young people, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be mentored. And that's why you're the oldest bunch I've talked to in a long time. I make it a practice not to talk to older people. I'm serious. No, the reason is I just have so much energy. And so I want to go to a high school, which I do regularly. I want to go to a junior college where working class kids go. I don't like going anymore to the Pasadena or Stanford. And I have to share a story with you because I also believe that humor is a very powerful weapon, and that too often we paint great, heavy pictures. And that's not the way life is. Life is full of all kinds of stuff. A lot of gray, but a lot of color, even in bad situations. So one day I was giving a talk at one of my favorite places, which is Evergreen College. And why is it my favorite place? Totally diverse, working class kids. That's who they are. And that's my kind of people. That's who I grew up with. And so just before I appeared for my talk, I took a double dose of a very powerful opiate because I was hurting very bad. And I think I slightly overdosed, okay? So I'm talking to this group, there's 400 or 500 kids in the auditorium, and suddenly the screen goes blank on me, literally. I'm looking and all I see is a hazy blank screen. And I say to myself, Abe, keep talking, you've done this for so many years, you'll probably be able to get through it. Keep talking. So I keep talking, and later people told me how long it took. About 10 minutes later, I come out of it, and I see the audience, and I continue my discussion, and I apologize to the audience for my conduct. And one of the kids gets up and says, Professor Osheroff, that was the best part of your talk. No, there's a big thing involved there, because it was the one part of my talk that was totally without self-censorship. We all engage in self-censorship, all of us. We don't tell it just as it is because we might break up the marriage. We don't tell it just as it is because the boss may fire us. We don't tell it just as it is because my professor won't put me on the tenure track. So we temper everything we say, even with each other, even in intimate relationships. And every once in a while, you experience the joy and the freedom of total lack of censorship. So I want to share another story with you that has to do with what I'm talking about, and that all of us, I think, can learn something from. I periodically go to the prison at Monroe, and I meet with a group of prisoners who are lifers without parole. Well, most of them are without parole. There are 2 or 3 who maybe will get out in 10 or 12 years, okay? And each time we meet, we discuss a concrete subject. I'm not the leader of the group, but I participate in the discussion. And every time I come away, I feel incredibly good. I feel liberated. I feel clean. And I say, why do I feel so good meeting with these guys? It was a really important experience for me. So the next time I was there, I talked to the leader of the group. There is in every group a leader. And I told him about this, and he said, it's very simple, Abe. All you guys out there have to worry about jobs, where you sleep, where you eat, blah, 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 blah. It ain't great, but we don't have to worry about those things. We have a bed to sleep in, and we're going to get meals and get some medical care, probably better than some people are getting out there. And so the only people we have to be careful with are the gods. Otherwise, we can say any fucking thing we want to each other, and taken without offense, taken as a form of discourse, taken as a form of really criticism. And it was a big eye-opener for me, because one of the problems with censorship is we all need to do some of it just to get along, but when it's overdone, we cease to be authentic. And that's your most powerful weapon, that your audience, your young person, your person you're mentoring, the people you're talking to, experience you as authentic. What does that mean, authentic? It has three components. We all think, more or less. We all talk, more or less. And we all do things, more or less. Those three components in most lives have nothing to do with each other. The way we act sometimes has nothing to do with the way we think, because we're always concerned, worried of the impact of what we do or the impact of what we say. But on those rare occasions when you're able to say, this is what I think, and I'm going to tell you about it, and I'm also going to tell you what I'm doing about it, on those occasions where one experiences that, it is what I call a spiritual orgasm. It doesn't stay with you. You've got to constantly fight to maintain it. Yeah. And there is no spiritual Viagra, or whatever the hell they use. But this is something I talk to young people about all the time. And to some degree, I have to assume there's some youth left in all of you, or you wouldn't be here. Youth, in the broadest sense of the word. Creativity, curiosity, resentment, anger, all the properties that we try to knock out of kids to make them not behave childishly. And in the process, we either murder the child or wound it or fuck it up for life. Because the dominant rule is no, 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 no. Huh? So what does that mean, coming down to you guys? It means that you have to really give a lot of thought to how you can touch the lives of that generation. And don't underestimate the clout that you have, having fought in the war. It gives you an enormous certain authority that normal civilians don't have. They may have it for other reasons. Well, use that. Now, many of you are young enough so that if you take care of your health, you will witness the things that I'm talking about. I regret that I won't be there to keep you company, because that'll be a field day for work, man. It'll be a progressive never could have a better time to go at it than what's coming down the pike. Win or lose, it's coming down the pike. Whether Hillary makes it or doesn't, whether she gets married to John McCain openly or secretly. What are you laughing about? You think that's impossible? They're already engaged. So don't get your hopes up. Keep the headlights on. Look down the road. It's very important to keep a historic perspective. Very important. And I'll close maybe with a few words on what I call the freedom train. To me, that's what life is. It's a freedom train. And the freedom train has three classes of passengers: first class, second class, and third class. And the freedom train runs into obstacles. It sometimes gets derailed. It sometimes comes to a hill it can barely make it up there, right? Now, what do the passengers do about it? It depends whether they're first, second, or third class passengers. Some passengers just sit in their seats. Other passengers are a little more thoughtful, and they lighten the load. They get out and they walk alongside the train, and once it begins to go again, they get back on the train. But then there's a class of passenger that when that train runs an obstacle, gets out and pushes the friggin' train. Now, where did that idea come to me from? It came to me from my grandfather, whom I never met, who talked that way about Russian railways, except in a different way. On the Russian railways, first-class passengers stayed in their seats, and the second-class passengers got out and walked. And the third-class passengers had to get out and push the friggin' train to get it going. So I kind of played around with the idea and came up with this one for your pleasure and entertainment. I have to warn you against myself. I'm warming up, and you have to stop me because I'm beginning to enjoy this. No, seriously. I came here with a certain apprehension. Yeah, a certain apprehension, because you're different from almost any group I've addressed ever. You are different. How do I talk to such a group? I also know that there are sharp differences in your ranks. Do we collaborate by participating in Veteran Day parades or not? Or do we stand on the sidewalk scowling at them? What do we do? I know that you're human beings and these differences exist. And at first, my mind was focused on that kind of stuff. And I'll be very happy to talk about it in a discussion, but I don't want to lead off with that. I don't want to be the first one that steps into that swamp. Okay? Finally, how many of you guys are from World War II? Vietnam? Anybody here from the current war in Iraq? There are people out there who are veterans of Iraq. You ought to contact them, talk to them. I know a couple of them myself. I meet with a couple of them fairly regularly. And as long as there are a lot of veterans, I want to tell you who, in my opinion, is one of America's greatest heroes. And that's the lieutenant who told the American Army, I will not fight in your war because it's unjust, it's undemocratic, it's unconstitutional, it's one big friggin' lie. And that's not his language, that's my language. This man showed incredible heroism. He would have faced less danger if he went to Iraq. As an officer, his chances of getting hurt or killed is a percentile. They weren't absent, but they were there. And this way he faces an enormous danger. It's almost certain that they're going to salt this guy away for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And they will be salting away an enormous American hero. I've met with him, I've talked with him. This guy is pure. I mean, he is authentic. There's no bullshit about this man. None at all. He radiates truth and courage. And I don't salute many people, but I sure salute him. He's something else. And it's wonderful to be part of a family of people that includes people like that. Because to me, that's family. To me, your family. Maybe distant relatives, but your family. Well, if I knew you better, you might be closer. But you are family. We have shared certain experiences. We've come up with a general response to those experiences. And we argue and have differences, but deep down underneath it, we respect each other. Because if you don't, get the fuck out. Without that, then nothing. And nothing. So I'll close for a few minutes, and then you can fire some questions at me if you want to. And we'll go on from there. Thank you.
Maybe when we address our questions to Abe, if you will, if you've addressed a question, allow others to address their question before you come back a second time, so everybody gets a chance to speak with him.
You know, that angry generation of children that you're talking about, they're already there. They're being raised by angry moms and grandmas in our low-income areas. And they're angry because of the fact that they're in poverty and they can't get out of it. And these kids come to school without breakfast. They don't want to, some parents don't want to sign them.
Listen, I work the polls on election day, And I really appreciate your remarks about the youth. Thank you.
Well, I want to ask a question. How many people here are familiar with a book, A People's History of America by Howie Zinn?
Yep.
Okay? He's a perfect example that I want to share with you. I mentored Howie Zinn when he was 70 years old and helped him make a decision to become a historian, although that's not what he did. Howie Zinn is not a historian. He's one of America's greatest storytellers, and that's a very important distinction. He humanizes history.
Yeah.
But, and many others that I still maintain contact with 20, 30 former young people, they're not young people anymore, who play important parts in our society. And it all came out of some individual attention, some mentoring. Because I remember how I was about 17, I was about 8 years older, something like that. And he doesn't talk about it, but he was a member of a very radical young group called the Young Communists. And I was a leader of that group. And he came to me with, what shall I do? The communists want me to go into the factories and work. And I took one look at him. He had these long, thin fingers. The machine would have clipped him off the first shot. He was skinny, bony. He was not cut out for that. But he had a sharp mind, beady eyes. He was a cut-out scholar. But he needed my permission. The left had its rigidity then too. And I was his boss politically. And I granted him the permission. Well, he went way beyond what I had to offer him on his own and made some very important contributions to American history. And his book today is a textbook in hundreds of universities. But that's just a small example. I mean, that happens all the time. All the time. I gave a talk at the School of Journalism, University of Texas, 5 years ago. And my opening remarks, I'll share them with you. These were journalists. You have a choice to make. If you want to guarantee yourself a job, become a journalistic hooah. If you want to be a good journalist, you're going to run some risks. And one of the risks is keeping a job. So now let's talk about that. That was the opening remarks for the discussion. Well, the consequences were enormous. I still hear from some of those guys. And some of them are surviving despite being good journalism. It is possible. It's difficult, but it is possible. So get out there to the young people. The average age here is a little bit too... You got to bring it down a little. And you can do it. Try to just invite young people in here. It's like a breath of fresh air for all of us.
Abe, you know so much about the 30s and 40s, and I've always wanted to ask you this. How do you explain the forces that brought us fascism? I mean, is this industrialists and bankers who financed Hitler and financed the fascism, but then it was blended into actual security agencies and militaries who did the military campaigns? And are these the same people that we face today in the White House? Is it the same sort of people, or is it a different phenomenon?
They are somewhat different. Starting with the White House, okay? The main problem with the White House is not evil. They're evil. They got a lot of evil people. The main problem with it is they're inept. The job is too big for this poor little guy. There are moments in which they don't last long, in which I feel compassion for him. I can't imagine that he doesn't go to bed scared shitless, because the man is not up to the job, evil or schmeevil. He's just not it. And more so than any president we've ever had. Now, whatever else about it, being president of the United States is one of the toughest jobs in the world. And very few presidents have risen to that occasion. The brilliance of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he was an upper class phenomenon, was that he could look down the road and see that unless certain steps were taken, the militancy of the American working class would go to unprecedented heights. when he made those changes, workers were seizing factories. I know because I helped them. They were actually taking over factories. I don't know what they would do with them afterwards, but they actually shut down factories, took them over, and so forth. We've had very few such presidents. One of our presidents was, in my opinion, the greatest war criminal in history. Worse than Hitler. And that's Harry Truman. Harry Truman deliberately had bombs dropped on 2 civilian cities when there was an option to achieve the same results without that. 2 things, I'll teach you a little history if you don't know it. First of all, the Japanese had sued for peace through the Swedish embassy and through the Russian embassy, because the Russians had not yet entered the war. Okay? The second thing is that the people in the American military leadership proposed, yes, that we use the bomb, that we take an island off the coast of Japan and obliterate it. And the message would be loud and clear. And he made a decision to go another route. And to me, it's absolute war crime. And the man should have been not just impeached, he should have been tried. But of course, that's not exactly the way history unfolded itself. So we've had all kinds of people. We've had people as president who were sort of what Americans would call half-assed presidents, but turned out to be better people once they got out of the presidency. But Carter's a little bit of that kind of guy, although there's much lacking in his presidency too. So what's worst about this situation is the ineptness and the incapacity to look down the road. Because anybody with any brains in the White House would realize that this quagmire revealed something very important for the United States. That there is no way in the world that they can expand American empire without instituting the draft. Because if Iraq proved anything, they didn't have enough police for the beat. Even from their viewpoint. They failed. And the only way they can continue to be top of the heap through military action is by introducing a draft. Well, I needn't tell you guys what that would do at this point. That would bring up quite a powerful reaction on the part of the American people. So, everybody in this room is young enough to see what I was talking about. Yeah, you are. Maybe myself, who knows? I'm not hanging there as long as I can.
Do you believe Bush, Cheney, Rice, Rumsfeld, Ashcroft, Gonzalez, should they be held responsible for war crimes?
That's a very difficult question, and I'm not ready to say yes fully, because to do that would equate them in the minds of the public with people like Hitler and so forth, and it's not quite, to call these guys fascists is using the word very loosely. The fact is, I can walk out of here and say at the top of my lungs, fuck Bush, whatever I want. I can sit here and talk to you about these things, and there are no policemen knocking at the door. That could happen in the future, but that's not what's happening. I'm very acquainted with academia, and I don't know of any professor in academia who's lost his job because of political views. And right here in this University of Washington, when I was younger, in the 50s, there wasn't a single progressive professor who wasn't fired or harassed, not one. They cleaned out Hollywood of the best filmmakers. They put 2 of my best friends into the electric chair. They had me going away for a 5-year prison sentence, although I got away and I hid for 3 years. Then the law was found unconstitutional, and I came out of hiding. So for me, I've been through a lot worse than this shit. We got it pretty easy. After this, we'll all get out of here, eat a nice lunch, and discuss how do you like what this guy said. We're very far from it. And I think our job is more to save, it's not that alone, to save what we won with great difficulty and not to negate the whole thing and say this package is rotten. No, it's not rotten. Very few people run away from the United States. Think about it, very few people. And the opportunity is open. Spain is the most democratic country in the world today. Get up and go. No, people don't.
We know we have it good here, but what we're worried about is the effect on the other side. All the Iraqis who are being killed, and they have it as bad as the Germans had it under Hitler. And that's what we're here for. It's not because Iraq is rough on Americans.
Yeah, well, the thing about that is, that's a worthy thing to feel, and it's a worthy thing to act on. But we'll have to go beyond that to win a mass base. To win people, they have to feel in terms of their interests. Oh, they feel badly about Iraqis dying. Doesn't stop them from eating lunch or good supper. Yes. I think I'll go back to what I originally said. Progressives are a bunch of basically decent people. In many ways, they're the cream of American life. But they too have a lot to lose. And yes, it's true, here and there, already young people are beginning to be hurt by the ongoings. But on a mass scale, it will be impossible for a young person to buy a home. On a mass scale, it'll be impossible for certain jobs to be open to American youth. That's a fact. And there's no way in the world they're able to stop that. And what does that do? That opens up enormous opportunities for work, for meaningful work. And talking about work, I want to make an observation. Not too many years ago, in a city in the South, Birmingham, Alabama, the vast majority of the black people were sick and tired of the bus system, but nothing happened. They were sick up to here with it. It was like a tank full of explosive gas, but nothing was happening. One spark set it off. One spark. But the gas had to be there. The anger had to be there. And it didn't just come out, it exploded overnight. Well, that's the way a lot of history works. A lot of history works that way. And that's why it's so important for us to mentor young people. Because in mentoring young people, we will touch here and there. Rosa Parks didn't come out of thin air. She already had been moved into the civil rights movement. She already had gone to the Highlander Folk School, where she learned a lot about white-black relationships. And that's what we're into too. We're into a situation where it will be an accumulation, explosive accumulation of anger and resentment, which could go either way depending on which spark is touched. And I always get the feeling, I'm going to share this with you, I speak to a lot of young people. I've spent the last 35 years speaking mainly to young people at 400 different universities. And what I've learned is I always get a good response from the group as a whole, and they walk away and they say, hey, that old man, pretty cool, you know, he was cool, it's cool. But there's always 3 or 4 who walk away and their lives have been touched different. And that, I have something to do with that, and I'll tell you, I want to share it with you. Young people, more than older people, have curiosity, they have rebelliousness, they are already anti-authoritarian, more than older people. The older we get, we may be politically left, but we become more conservative in our lives. That's the way biology works, okay? So, where the hell was I?
The lives she touched.
What's that?
The lives she touched and the young people.
Yes, the lives you, yes, thank you. But again and again, I've been reminded and learned that there's always 3 or 4 people who go out totally different. And the reason has to do with my philosophy of teaching. My philosophy of teaching is not to laden people with facts. Look what they did. Look at the figures. Look at how many dead. Look how many wounded. You know, after a while, this thing gets constipated. And by the way, it's the least reliable organ in our body. Most parts of our body function on a regular basis. I'm that serious. And long ago, a Greek philosopher, Socrates, said, before you bring the new horses in the stable, clean out all the old horseshit. So my idea of teaching is not to give the student material, but to touch things in the student that are there. To appeal to those parts of the student, those parts of the young people that make them more amenable to change. Try it sometimes. Instead of banging away. You know, I'm going to be very frank with you. Amy Goodman's a wonderful person. She bores the shit out of me. Because I hear the same stuff again and again till it's coming out of here. I'd rather look at a crime movie. Just to relax. But how can I touch some people in a way different than that? It's not enough for me to say she bores the shit out of me. She does good work. But not for me, and not for the kind of people I want to talk to.
I love the way you talk about speaking to youth, and especially what you were just saying about the ways to reach people. I wonder if you would also speak a little bit about reaching, not youth, because I actually would suggest that although youth is certainly vital and eager sometimes to be moved, as you just described, I would also argue that so are other people further along in their years, despite the argument you just made that we tend to get be less easily moved. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. As we age, how do we move people as well?
How do we age, you think?
How do we move people who are aging as well? So we are not only speaking to young people who, as you say, is a vital community. Mm-hmm. How do we also speak to people as they get into these different stages of our lives?
Well, the best people to do that are people who have been spoken to when they were young. And I'm not saying that lightly. The best people who are capable of doing that are people who already have been given a little head start program on how to view the world in a different way.
Right.
How to learn that there's something else in life beside making money. There's something else in life beside getting promotions. And it's available to most of us if we address ourselves to it. What we have to give people is not information. That's important. What we have to give people is respect and love. I wasn't a very loving radical most of my life. Shit, if you disagree with me, you got a lot of shit flying out there. I had to learn that. I had to learn that through frustration, through defeat. I've been defeated more than I've won. There's no campaign I ever engaged in that ever achieved its objective. No, really. Anti-war, still with us. Discrimination, up to here. We're still a color-divided society, really sharply color-divided. The recent discussion with immigrants, I could go on and on, right? But two things to me are very obvious. One is that in the process of fighting these fights, fighting them win or lose, recognizing that the very process of dissent increases me as a human being, because I'm in control, more in control of my life, especially this part of me. You all have to find your ways of doing it. All I can suggest is a direction in which to go.
Abe, we have an ongoing thing where in our work we have a dichotomy between those that want to go out and get in people's face and feel in our anger and frustration what's happening that we have to do something, and it has to be something that's going to draw attention. other people feel like we're a peace organization, non-violent, that our response has to be more civil, tamer. You mentioned the Veterans Day thing, classic example, marching with 50 peace doves on display on our vests and on our banners, versus those who think or feel that that's really abetting the enemy, that we need to do more. We need to be in the face of that military crowd. It's very splitting to the group. What do you think is the best response? How do we be more effective in getting our peace, anti-war message across?
Speaking in military terms, it's like, do we try to stop the cannon from firing by sticking our head into the artillery piece? It's a very noticeable contribution. It is, yeah. Or do we go around and talk to the artillery soldier about what this thing is? Or do we in advance sabotage the cannon when nobody's around? Or what do we do? I think the most important thing we have to keep in mind is that we're going to get nowhere unless we increase our ranks. And we'll not increase our ranks by head-on confrontation and treating these people with total lack of respect, even when they sharply disagree with us. I know that's difficult. Of course it's very difficult. It's easier to stand across the street and yell and shout and say you're full of shit. But it doesn't accomplish very much. So confrontation is putting your head right into the cannon mouth. That's what it is. And it doesn't get us anywhere. It may feel good, you know, temporarily. You feel very righteous. And to some degree that's true. I also want to respect the people that feel that way. Probably they're willing to even go to jail if necessary. But you don't influence very much when you go to jail. I'm using the word jail in the narrow, broad sense of the word. Being cut off from the rest of society. We're having in our little peace group, my wife is very much involved in all these things, a big controversy over a banner. Should it say bring the troops home, or should it say bring the troops home now? And to allow that to become a controversy is friggin' ridiculous. And to bring the troops home now distances us somewhat from people who say, what do you mean now? By the way, it's physically impossible to bring the troops home now. If an order were issued for bringing the troops home from Iraq, it would take months. So the now thing is superfluous, and if anything, it separates us a little bit. It makes people think these guys are not for real. They're not for real. Bring the troops home. That slogan remains viable, even with this enormous sea change from Republicans to Democrats. I want to share something with you. When I was this high, I learned about the American two-party system. And an uncle would say to me, in broken English, he was an immigrant, in America, the politics is a turkey with two wings. Sometimes it's this wing, and when this wing gets a little tired or hurt, they make it with this wing. My father used an even more vulgar expression. Be prepared for this. He says, Abraham, Democrats, Republicans, they're all going to screw you. The Republicans is the wholesale crooks, and the Democrats is the retail crooks. And when it comes down to the real stuff, the difference is that when the Democrats screw you, they sometimes use a little Vaseline. I'm just quoting him. A lot of wisdom in that. True. And I noticed that The Wall Street ratings for Vaseline went up with the Democratic turnover. Let me give you an example of the contributions we can make. We have a lot of contributions that we can make, those who understand. Take the question of minimum wage. The very expression, the fight for minimum wage, is an obscenity. And we have to get rid of it. We're for a living wage. Minimum wages people can't live on. Adding 10% or 15% to the already crippled friggin' wage is not going to do it. So when I suggested this to a couple of functional Democrats in the state leadership, I said, what do you mean do away with the minimum wage? Yeah, do away with the fucking minimum wage. We've been stuck with it for 15 years. Now, is it a big thing? No. But isn't it something to think about with regard to all the things we're fighting for? To present them in terms that are more human? The very concept of minimal wage, I'm living on the minimal wage. I'm just having fun now. We're going to have a ball in the next month, man. I'll tell you something. When either one of those two guys becomes president, either, who's the Republican candidate? McCain. The fact that they locked him away for 5 years doesn't change who he is. He's a friggin' opportunist, and a dangerous one. A two-sided friggin' opportunist. And as for the opposition, if indeed she wins the presidency, I was going to leave the country. But if I go to Israel, they'll put me in jail. So I'm in a jam. Now there's a new rising star. Araka baraka bashmaka. Oh, don't play him down. He has all the ingredients. He's handsome. He's enormously articulate. He has enough charisma to take care of 2 Bill Clintons. He is it. If he has enough public affair with Hillary, they're in. Don't be taken in by this bullshit. Don't be taken by any of this bullshit. Lay back and look at it carefully. Because deep down it's true, it's a turkey with 2 wings. In the long run, historically, the present system of politics in America will always be an unfair system. With the Electoral College, with the fact that a state that's got 500 inhabitants and 1 million cows has the same senatorial power as California. That's crazy shit. That's what we have. Or maybe the numbers are a little inexact. I'm close.